All right, welcome to another episode of the Political Playbook. I'm Wyatt, and this is my co-host Darren. And
Hello, hello.
let's go ahead and hop right into it. So these tariffs appear to have been, I'm not gonna say resolved, but they've at least been postponed. What have you been hearing? What have you been reading?
Yeah, well, it looks like in the final hour they've come to a resolution. I think both countries, Canada and Mexico, have agreed to send like 10,000 troops, roughly, apiece, to their respective borders with us. And I guess for Mexico's part, they're going to try and curb the illegal aliens as well as fentanyl trafficking. And as for the Canadians, I guess they're going to curb their very small amount of uh, fentanyl being brought over the border. Uh, it's kind of a, I mean, I guess I'll just go into my thoughts on it. Uh, the Mexico, you know, the deal with Mexico seems a little more warranted, or a lot more warranted than the deal with Canada. I mean, I saw something online saying that the pounds of fentanyl that we intercepted from the Canadian border, like last year, was like in, in the double digits, so like 43 or
That's the
something,
number I keep saying as well, 43 pounds.
which I mean, I guess, you know, 43 pounds could theoretically kill a lot of people, but we're talking about many, many, many thousand pounds that are coming over the Mexican border. So to treat both countries basically the same and then ask for the same resolution of,
Right.
10,000 roughly true. I mean, this program is going to actually, I saw a figure, it's going to cost like over $1 billion for Canada to mobilize all these troops and then for all the other things they're going to put in place. And it seems like uh, I'll say one last thing and then I'll send it to you because I'm kind of monopolizing it. But it seems like, as far as Canada goes, we've just kind of expended a lot of social capital for no reason, really. I mean, I think, you know, different measures could have been taken. But anyways, your thoughts?
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, the 43 pounds is what gets sent from Canada to America in fentanyl. Do you have any idea what that pounds is in from Mexico to the United States? If you were to just throw a wild guess out there.
I I'm going to guess it's in the hundreds of thousands, but I could be mistaken.
Yeah, not quite that much, but it's roughly around 20,000 pounds, a little bit more.
Oh, okay, so much
Yeah,
less than
sig-
I even
yeah,
I conceived. So,
which make no, I mean, 20,000 pounds is a ridiculous amount of fentanyl. I mean, you're talking about that stuff is in micro doses everywhere. Um, yeah, I mean, my problem with the tariffs here is that he's kind of using them as a stick for one of our two biggest trading partners, really our top three biggest trading partners if you count China, which we'll
oh
discuss here
yeah,
in a second. But Mexico makes total sense to me, like wanting to use the stick a little bit. And when I say makes sense, I mean it's more justifiable to the American public, especially when you give like account of like why Trump won. A huge reason is this like hatred towards the crisis at the southern border, fentanyl, immigration, and whatnot. So he's trying to figure out a way to get a win out of this that's relevant here. So, like in all honesty, outside of the 10,000 troops committed by both countries, Caitlin Collins at CNN had a really good second segment about this. The only thing that Canada changed was they committed more troops to get to Trump's 10,000 mark, and they have to have a new position called the fentanyl czar. But everything else, Justin Trudeau announced in December, and he said, "Yeah, we're trying to curb the fentanyl coming over from America to Canada. So we're going to invest in drones and surveillance technology and monitors." Um, I mean that to me, it just once again we're going through the Trump cycle, man. It's declare a crisis, threaten action, make a fucking phone call, nothing changes fundamentally, and then declare victory. And we're at the declare victory step here. Um, and I don't understand the Canadian one at all because I think maybe he thought that it would push their citizens to want to be like a member of the 51st state. But from everything I've read, it's led to a more like nationalistic uprising within the country. Like they're almost looking for someone to stand up for Canadian independence, which
Oh yeah.
a little
Yeah.
funny to be honest with you.
Well, I've heard the same thing that if it was the goal to create internal friction, it's really only gave them a rallying cry. But I don't know. I mean, if I'm being charitable, surely there was an underlying, goal or something, and then with Canada, and then these, perhaps fentanyl was just the pretext. So maybe he wants to somehow renegotiate USMCA or that
Hey,
that
who negotiated that, by the way?
well, that was Trump.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So
Couldn't remember though.
perhaps he no longer finds the terms of the agreement acceptable. But that's what some people have been speculating. I to to me, it sounds like perhaps the only logical. I mean, how? Maybe I'm trying to apply rationality where it doesn't,
Where
where
it
it
doesn't
does.
apply, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, as far as Mexico goes, obviously we need to curb the flow of people coming in. 10 million people just came in. That's over double the population of our state. That's just insane. So
Right.
I'm all for, you know, you know, carrot versus the stick. If I'm all for using the stick to, get our way, but I just to reiterate, we're just burning political capital when doing this to Canada. Canada has done no wrong. I mean, it's
Right.
really just one of the dumbest.
And
I don't
not
get it.
to cycle it again, but I mean, there's no benchmark for cancellation. There's no like this is basically just going to be a reusable stick that Trump is going to use to get his way with Canada, to get his way with Mexico. He won't be able to do it as much with China, I don't think, because China obviously is a much bigger global economic player than either Canada or Mexico.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Which is why he's kind of not really commenting as much on China, because he's pretty sure the bluff isn't going to work. Um, and that's my, I still don't know if this is a bluff or if this is like one of those things where he was like, I don't care if I'm going to put tariffs on you, but like I would rather not put tariffs, but this is not a bluff. Like I will do it. I still have no idea. Which is, I don't know. Like if I was Canada or if I was Mexico, like the only hope they had to resist this type of thing is if they like came together in a coalition with like the European Union and China, like I don't know how they were supposed to resist this because the threat of like Trump's stick, access to the US economy was just too big to battle by themselves, at least.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if it, I mean, they had to capitulate. I mean, I've seen statistics. It's like nearly 80% for both countries. 80%, less so for Canada, I think, but of exports for Canada and Mexico go to the U.S. So, I mean, it would just be devastating to levy a 25% tariff on their goods. Even though, I mean, with tariffs, ideally they would be targeted, to a specific industry. But, when it's a blanket like this, all that does is, I mean, effectively all that does is like punish American consumers because, take like guacamole and, coffee, I guess, in the case of Colombia. But avocados for Mexico, we don't really have a lot of domestic anything really meaningful domestic avocado growth. I mean, that's due to our climate, versus their climate. So it's not like we could build like a domestic avocado like powerhouse that could, it's
Yeah.
all that
See,
all that does is just punish the American consumer. And yeah,
See,
it's
and
silly.
I think that this scenario right now, like what you just described, that was like a traditional view of tariffs. Like the reason we're putting a tariff is because we want to either A, protect American industries here, right? Or
Mhm.
or incentivize like a kickstart of those industries, right? Um that there's no way that that's what this is. And the only reason I say that is because these are blanket tariffs with minor exceptions. So, like Canadian energy, for example, is tariffed at is threatened to be tariffed at 10%, not at 25, right? Um, I think that this idea is he's truly trying to do this as like a revenue driver to justify getting rid of the income tax. Um, and I think the problem with that is he doesn't know how that works and how that would affect our budget because we have roughly a $3.5 trillion budget, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
tariffs account for roughly less than 2% of that. You could throw all these tariffs to 25-30% for the globe. They wouldn't even get to half of what the income tax does. Um, and this is just flawed thinking, right? Because he also thinks that this is going to help our trade deficit, and it's like, well, yes, that might be true. I still don't think that it's going to flip it to where we're a trade exporter, right? All it's going to do is hurt American consumers, right, with higher prices and the same quality goods, which is supposed to be not what America's all about. The entire like focus of this country for the past 100 years has been free trade, low cost for the same quality goods. You know, the only way this makes sense is as a stick, right? And he's gonna do it until somebody calls his fucking bluff. Because if nobody calls his bluff, why would he not? Why would he not use it, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I fear the day when people might I mean, alone nobody can. I mean, they really have no choice to capitulate, but I'd really hate for them to start turning towards China, uh, more so than they already have. I mean, so many South American countries in the last, yeah, couple decades have turned to China as their main trading partner.
Right.
It's
Well, if I may, I could just add like a small idea onto that. So if you remember the tariffs on China during Trump's first term, right? So the
Mhm.
Chinese, to get around this, after the USMCA, they just started importing their stuff in factories in Mexico. They're basically just shipping factories, like little warehouses that they use to get past the export tariff. So I think, maybe this is another goal at that, um, because this is basically, and the only reason I say that that's relevant to what you said is because this has dramatically increased trade with Mexico with China, right? Like they're becoming
Mhm.
greater trade partners as a result of the previous tariffs. So I think when we back Canada, Mexico, China into a corner, it's going to, out of necessity, either push them to unity, capitulation, or to our enemies, you know?
Oh yes, yes. Yeah, not certainly not the moves I would be making. I mean, if like I said last podcast, I mean, if there were like some grand vision of like restoring American manufacturing and, maybe like working with Congress to pass bills to uh well, it's kind of like with the Chips Act, that was a direct action to like boost a specific industry, so there was like some vision there. Uh
Right.
but that just doesn't seem to be the case in this point. It really is just a means of punishing to get what you want. But in the case of Canada, I mean, what we got wasn't, in my opinion, was not worth the political capital we expended. So it's been a blunder, in my opinion. But at this point, I think I've probably repeated myself. I don't know if I have too much more to say on the tariff matter since it's basically been postponed for a month. I guess we'll see what happens next. I All I can say is I'm a little disappointed, but I'm glad it's been delayed, and hopefully the tariffs don't actually take full effect because uh, I just don't see it ending well. It's yeah.
Yeah, and this will be my last word, really, too. There's been a couple of economic studies on the potential impact of like U.S. GDP and prices based on these tariffs if they were enacted. So let's say in 30 days the pause ends and Trump's like, "That's it. I'm not seeing enough results. We're imposing these tariffs," right? Which is a
Mm-hmm.
hypothetical. We could see gas shoot up minimum 30 cents up to $1 instantly.
Yeah.
That's based off demand as of today. Um, the price of anything plastic related, because that's the type of oil we get from Canada as well. That could shoot up about 8 to 10%. U.S. GDP as a whole could drop 2%, which is like that would be the first time since, gosh, I don't even know if '08 was that, or yeah, '08 was that bad. Um, you know, I
Yeah.
uh Now, granted, the Mexican, Canadian, and the European Union economy would have about 4% each, right? In terms of like loss of GDP, so they would be hurt far worse than we would. But the principle of the study is that like if these tariffs weren't active, there is no winner. We're all just slightly worse, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and they've even showed that in some of these studies that China would be doing better because they would be forced to trade with the European Union more. They would increase their Belt and Road Initiative. It just kind of depends on what route they take. But moral of the story is that if enacted, these are not good for anybody, especially American consumers.